Oh, thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate that. So my name is Mike Davis, and today we're going to be talking about PowerPivot, and we're going to be talking about DAX. I see there's looks like there's about 45 people in the room, so um, I know there's going to be a varying degree of people that are familiar with DAX and with PowerPivot. Let me get my monitor to share here. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Julie, can you see my screen okay?
Not yet.
Just let me know when it comes up.
There we go.
Okay? All right, great. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. All right, so like Julie said, my name is Mike Davis, and I'm a managing project lead and a BI architect with Pragmatic Works here in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm also an author on several books on SQL Server and business intelligence. A lot of those have to do with integration services, which is one of my favorite tools to work with. And I'm also certified in business intelligence also in 2008. I haven't got to 2012 one quite yet. So there's some of the books I've written there, so if you're interested in integration services or BI in general, I've got a few things out there to take a look at. Today we're going to talk about PowerPivot. Now hopefully you guys read the intro there, or read the description of the engagement here, and this is actually not going to be an intro PowerPivot session. It's going to go a little more deep into DAX and talk about some more complex functions that you can do in DAX. One of the things that we've seen in terms of the change from the shift from multidimensional over to the BISM tabular is that there are some limitations of BISM tabular and the DAX language, and there's things you can do inside of PowerPivot versus what you can do with MDX and a traditional cube. Now, some of that functionality is getting better and better. Each version of PowerPivot, each version of SQL that comes out is going to have more and more features for the tabular models. But right now there still are some limitations that exist inside of there. But with some complex DAX and this little extra work, we can actually get around some of those limitations. So, for example, one of the limitations is many-to-many. So traditionally, you can just have a bridge table and you connect it up, and everything works great with a regular old cube. You can slice and dice with a many-to-many relationship. But with DAX or with PowerPivot, we're going to have to write a little DAX function and try to jump through a hoop to make that work. It's not too difficult, but I'll show you how to do that. Inactive relationships. So there's relationships, relationship types inside of PowerPivot, just like there are inside of a cube. But one of the things that you can't do in your tabular model, that you can do in multidimensional, is you can't have more than one active relationship. For example, if I put in a date dimension into a cube, it can play the role of due date and ship date and order date. And with PowerPivot, that doesn't quite work. You have inactive relationships, and I'll show you some ways to get around that. I'll show you some hierarchy paths. Hierarchies that kind of do a parent-child thing, and a parent-child hierarchy that automatically kind of gets built out in multidimensional. Doesn't work like that inside of DAX, but you can make it actually work. We have some DAX functions I'll show you that will let you use those parent-child hierarchies. And then last, we'll talk about some time intelligence and solution functions there. And then at the end, I got a little bonus prize for you that everybody can take away today. And it's a PowerPivot workbook that you can start using immediately today. All right, so that's our agenda. So we're going to talk about today. So first thing we're going to talk about is many-to-many. So and many-to-many is a relationship where you have two tables where many items on one table can relate to one item on the other, and many items on that second table can be tied to items on the first table. So just an example of that, I just finished doing some work with a healthcare company recently, and so a good example of that is I've got a patient that goes in and they have visits, and when you go in to get seen by the doctor, you can have multiple diagnoses. So multiple diagnoses can be tied to multiple visits, of course. In other words, the same diagnosis can exist on multiple visits. And then you can have multiple visits, or even so you can have a visit that has multiple diagnoses. So I may go in to see the doctor, and he tells me now I've got 10 different things that are wrong with me. So there's a many-to-many type relationship. So if I say I want to slice it by diagnosis and see all the visits, that's a many-to-one. If I do the exact opposite, I say, okay, show me all my visits this day and show me the diagnoses that occurred. Now that's a many-to-many relationship. So how do we make that work inside of DAX? It can confuse the users if you just try to stick a regular bridge table in there and have it sort of slicing and dicing. You'll get all sorts of crazy numbers, and I'll show you that in an example here in just a second. And I'll show you how to try to make that a little easier for your end users. So I've got some PowerPivot workbooks here. I've got one called Mini Demo. Now this presentation, I've given this presentation several times, so you can actually download it at MikeDavisSQL.com. If you go there and search for PowerPivot, you'll see my demos there, and you can download all these PowerPivot workbooks that I have out there. But I want to open up my Mini Demo here and kind of show you what we're doing. So I have a couple tables here. The first one I have is I have a sales rep table. So I've got 4 sales guys, and each one of them has an ID. So Mike, Dustin, Adam, and Brian there, all 4 have an ID. And then I have my sales table here. And so this is the sale amount that it was sold from that. And there's an ID tied to that sales amount. So this is kind of like a sale ID or a transaction ID. You can think of it like that. So one of the things that you would expect here is if there was a salesman tied to this, and right here I would have a sales ID, and I would have a salesperson ID, and then just have the salesperson ID listed here right next to it. Unfortunately, we can't do that because in our situation here, multiple salespeople can work on one sale. So you can consider, like, for selling a large engagement or large computer systems to someone, you may have more than one salesperson that's actually working on that job to get that sale to happen. So that's what's happening here. So we've got my sales guys, Mike, Dustin, Brian, Adam, all the ones that I showed on the front screen there. Maybe 2 or 3 of those guys work together on one of these sales. Maybe it was just one guy, or maybe it was just 2 guys, but they have multiple people on this, so I can't really have just a single ID column mapping to that. So to make that work, we have a bridge table. So here's my bridge table right here, and this basically shows my sales rep ID, so I can see that this sales guy right here worked on these 2 sales, and I can also see that here sales number 457 here was worked on by sales rep number 4 and by sales rep number 1. So you can see that 2 people worked on that. So this is a typical many-to-many relationship that you would see. And this table here, this only has the IDs on it. This would be called a bridge table or a factless fact table. That's another name. I hate the name factless fact table because it makes the table sound like it's a useless table. But bridge table is one of my favorite terms. But either one of those are interchangeable terms. So how do we make this work? First of all, let's go take a look at our PowerPivot model. Oh, and my PowerPivot is missing on the top. So this happens sometimes. Every once in a while when you open up Excel, you'll see that the PowerPivot model kind of disappears. I find this happens to me, I think it's something to do with my video card. Anytime I'm doing a presentation or connect up to a monitor or projector separately, it seems to go away on me. So I think it's something to do with my video card driver or something. Not quite 100% sure, but it's real easy to fix. So if we go down here to Options, and I'm using Office 2013 here. All the features, everything I'm going to show you today will work inside of Office 2010 and Office 2007, except for a couple small things that I'll point out later on when we come across them. All right, so we're going to go to Add-ins here under Options, and I'll pick the COM add-ins and click Go. And you'll see as a PowerPivot right there, it is checked, so it should be on there. You'd think if I just hit OK, it would just pop up there, but it doesn't quite happen. So what we've got to do is we've got to go to Options, go to Add-ins, and select COM add-ins, uncheck that, click OK, and then go back into it one more time, Add-ins, COM add-ins, and select PowerPivot, click OK, and there we go. Now it appears back up top here. So if yours disappears like that, just go uncheck it and recheck it, and the add-in should reappear. Again, this doesn't happen to me all the time. It seems to happen only when I have presentation items going on my screen here. So, of course, it always happens when I'm presenting, which is the perfect time for it to happen, isn't it? All right, so let's go into PowerPivot here and click on Manage, and let's take a look at the relationship I built inside of here. So what I did was took those items and I created linked tables on those items there. And if I look at diagram view, there's my 3 tables that I pulled in. So there's my sales reps, there's my sales rep bridge, and my sales table there. So here's the problem. Here's my sales information here. So this is where my money's at over here. And I'm going to put in a dollar symbol here. All right. And then here's over here, these are my sales rep. These are my guys over here. See, their names are over here. And I need to be able to tie that. If I say I want to see all of the sales that Adam had, or if I want to see all the sales that Brian had, I need to be able to do that. Or if I say, okay, show me this one sale, and show me who all the sales guys were that worked on that one sale, I need to be able to do that too. Now you would think that this will work great. Bridge table here, I've got a relationship obviously. The problem is This relationship here is pointing one direction here and one direction here, and in DAX it doesn't see across relationships like that. So you kind of got a break here. So I can see the sales bridge information from my sales table, and I can see the sales bridge information from my sales rep table, but it doesn't go across. It doesn't actually make that jump across there, and because of that, our little bridge table here doesn't really do exactly what we want. Now, I'm hoping they're going to get this fixed in future versions, but there is a way around this. There's a way to make this work. So let's go back to our data view here, and normally what I would do is I would have a sum down here, my sum of sales amount, and it would just be just like this: sum of sales amount, sum, sales amount, and that's it. I'm done. That's my normal calculation that I would put inside of here. That calculation is not going to work, and I'll show you what happens when we try to make that work. Go back here to sheet 4 here, and let's clear everything off, this item here. And let's grab my sales rep name, and let's grab the sum of sales amount, throw that in there, and let's take a look and see what we get here. That just does not look right. I seriously doubt that every single salesperson had the exact same sale amount. And then on top of that, look at your total down at the bottom. Obviously that's not right, because 2,900 there added up multiple times is now obviously added 2,900. So what's happening here? So what's happening is it doesn't see a relationship between the sales table and our rep table. And because there's no relationship seen there, it just does a Cartesian product, basically a cross join of everything to everything. And so everything's summed up, and that's our max number. So all of our sales is 2,900, but obviously we can't slice it by those users. You'll see that there is even a little message over here. It says a relationship between tables may need to be created. And it really, that's not true. We don't need to create any more relationships because we've already got the relationship created. It's just going through a bridge table that is just allowing us to get to that data. So how do we make this work? I'll show you how. Let's go back into our PowerPivot here. And I've got another calculation down below here, and I'm going to stretch this out a little bit here. And I'm going to hit Enter a couple times. This is a long calculation, so I want you to see what's going on. You hit Shift and hit Enter to kind of bring it down. There we go. Now if I zoom in here. All right, so here's the first part here is the many-to-many amount. That's just the name of my calculation. And I'm using the calculate function, and I'm using a filter function and a count rows function. So those are my main functions I'm using here on this. So what I've done is basically what calculate says is I want you to do a calculation, but only when this is true. So my calculate statement says do this item here, in this case sum sales amount. Great. But then after the comma, everything after that is a filter. So I'm saying I don't want you to do this calculation unless these items are true. And what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for when I actually have a sales ID on my bridge table, and I'm counting the number of rows where that actually is true and checking to make sure it's greater than 0. So now I'm only doing the summation if I actually find a row on my bridge table that has that matches that number, that has a row count greater than 1. So anytime I find a salesperson, the name of either Mike or Adam, their sales ID on that table, it matches up to a sale, of course I'll get a count greater than 1. So if there's at least one salesperson on it, then they'll add it up. All right, let's go back now, and let's take a look and see what happens in that. Oops. Let's go back and take a look at it and see what happens when I pull that one over instead. So instead of sum of sales amount, I'm going to use my many-to-many sales amount, drop that in. There we go. It's looking a little better there now. Now we can actually see how much sales Adam's had, and Brian, and Dustin, and Mike, and they should add up to the correct amount there. Now let's go and slice this up one more time to show you sales ID here on my columns. And let's look a little closer, see what's actually going on here in the background. So here's sale number 457, right? And that sale was for the amount of $200. But you can see that I got a 200 next to Mike, and I got a 200 next to Brian here. But it didn't add up to 400 at the bottom here, and that's exactly what I wanted, because Mike worked on this $200 sale, Brian worked on that $200 sale. Together, it's still a $200 sale, just two guys actually worked on it at one time. Now, overall, though, I see Brian worked on these two sales, and that is something I want to add up. I do want to see his summation there, and that's correct. So he did actually work on $250 and a $200 sale, so he's got $450 worth of sales for Brian. Same thing for Mike down here. It's 100, 200, so he's got a $300 sale here. But this 200 here, oops, sorry about that, hit the Windows key by accident. But this 200 here that I have, it doesn't add up down at the bottom, which is good. It's what I want. And so it doesn't add up to this summation here at the end. It doesn't double up, actually. And so the 2,900 is the right number. If I had added that 200 in there twice, then I'd see 3,100 instead of 2,900. So my summations are correct, even though they may not look right. And so this is why it can confuse your end users. So if I pull out the sales today, and we go back here, and if you add this up, this 2,050, 45, 450, 550, 300, it's obviously more than 3,000, more than 2,900. So your end user may look at this and go, hey, there's something wrong with this report. This 2,900 is not right here because I'm adding these up and this is not adding up correctly. Then you have to explain to them that, no, what you're seeing here is that's how many sales were attributed to Adam, how many sales were attributed to Brian and Dustin and Mike, but that is the actual number of sales because some of these numbers are repeated inside of here. And then you can also put in slicers and things like that, and you can slice by the sales ID like I showed here to kind of show them what's going on, so they can tell that number is correct, and the number across the bottom here is right because it is adding up per sale instead of per person here. All right, so that is how that works. Let's see, where's the question room at? I don't have access to the questions. Julie, can you give me access to the questions so I can check it every once in a while, see if there's any questions?
Hi, Mike. Yes, we have a couple of questions, but it's just related to audio questions. So I'll let you know if there are some questions related to the session.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Nice, thanks.
All right, so that's many-to-many there. Let's go on to our next section here. So many-to-many. Easy way to do that, you just got to count the rows on the bridge table there. Again, this code is on my blog. You can download the full zipped up solution here for all these items. All right, so let's go on to the next one. So relationships. So like I mentioned earlier, you can't have more than one active relationship on inside of your PowerPivot workbook between two tables. So back in multidimensional, if I pulled in a date dimension table and there were multiple dates on my fact table, let's say there was a due date, and a ship date, and an order date, then I would tie my date key for my date dimension to those three items. I'd have three keys tied over to the fact table, three relationships there inside of my DSV. And then when I go actually create my cube, it automatically says, hey, we see the date dimensions got three different relationships, so we're going to give you what's called role-playing dimensions. And it'll create a due date, order date, and ship date dimension, even though in the background I've only got one table. I only have my date dimension table. Analysis Services did a great job of just putting in three role-playing dimensions for me. PowerPivot doesn't do that. So DAX, you're not going to be able to do that just automatically, but we can actually use those inactive relationships on there. So I may have three relationships, only one is active, but I want to use one of those other active relationships. Speaking of relationships, Bill Gates, like you heard, he's had trouble with his relationships after he got this new haircut. I don't know what's going on with him. All right, so you guys are going to learn about PowerPivot today, and you get a lot of bad jokes. All right, that's it. All right, so let's go back to my workbooks over here. And let me close up my many-to-many relationship example here. And nope, don't save that. And let's open up my text demos, and I think it's in here. And again, my PowerPivot add-in keeps turning off on me. Let's turn that back on again. Apologize for the delay on that. I have to do it every time I open a new workbook, unfortunately. There it is, that's back. Let's make sure this is the right one here. Yep, there we go. Okay, great. All right, so here is my diagram view, and you'll notice that I have multiple relationships here going up to my reseller sales amount. So I've got these dotted lines, and I have a solid line. That solid line is my active relationship, and the dotted lines there are my inactive relationship. So if I double-click on one of those lines there, bring it up, you'll see that my active relationship is between ship date and my date key. So ship date is actually what's being used to slice and dice my my items up when my end user drags over date right now. And if I go to one of the other ones, one of the inactive ones, and double click on it, you'll see that this is an order date, and it is not active. And of course, if I try to check that and make it active and click OK, it should give me an error message there. It says you cannot activate the relationship because it already has one. So let's hit cancel there. So ship date is my active relationship here. So let's go back to data view. But so what are the relationships being used for? Well, they're being used so that I can actually sum up items, sum up information, and do calculations on my cube and slice it by a certain item. Well, we can do that by using some of the functions that are built into DAX. And there is a function built in here called UseRelationship. So let me pull this down so you can see it. And hit enter here. I hold down shift to hit enter to make that happen. Let's zoom in here. All right. So notice I call this year-to-date sales by due date. So I'm telling my end user that this is being sliced by due date. This is not being sliced by my sales date here. So I'm using a different date here. So I actually name my calculation properly so I can tell where it's at. And then I use the calculate statement here inside of the total YTD. Now, total YTD is a year-to-date function that's built into DAX. It's I'm going to talk about time intelligence a little bit later here, so I'm not going to go too deep into that right now. So calculate, again, the very first thing it just says, do this right here. Well, I've already got a sum of sales amount out there, so I just grabbed that and dropped it in here. So it's not really calculating anything. It's just grabbing an already done calculation for me. I could have put the calculation here if I wanted to, but I just grabbed the already existing one. And then again, right after that comma, everything after that comma in the calculate function means filter. It means only do it for this. And then I'm putting in the use relationship function. And so I'm saying use relationship, I want to use the full date alternate key, and I want to use it where my due date is equal to my full date alternate key. So basically I'm saying use relationship between the due date and my full date alternate key. Don't use the relationship between my ship date. And that's it. It's very simple. Use relationship, you tell it what table, or you tell it where your table's at. This is my date table and where the alternate key is at. And then you just tell it what two columns to actually map together here. And then on my total YTD, just wrapping that around it. And again, you have to put your full day alternate key or your actual date key at the end of your total YTD, and that's it. And now it does my year-to-date calculation based on my due date. So if I go back here now, and let's see if I have that already sliced up somewhere. And I thought I had a report already showing that. And I don't. All right, so let's just create one real quick. Let's create a pivot table here off of this. Let's show that in action here. So I'm going to grab my date here, my calendar, and I'm going to grab my reseller sales. And it was sales amount by due date. And that's YTD sales amount. Let's do YTD sales also, just the regular YTD sales. And let's do sales amount also. Drop that in here. There we go. And if I expand out one of these years, it should be pretty easy to see what's going on here. There we go. So here we can see that my year-to-date sales amount does not match my year-to-date sales amount by due date. It's using a different date, which is exactly what I expected there. But my year-to-date is actually working properly here. So you can see it's actually adding up the numbers here. So my 2,416 here is not, exactly matching my 216 here, which is great. It just means using two different dates. But you can tell that these two numbers here are getting added together to make my year-to-date sales here. So if I had a sum of sales amount that was filtered on due date also, those numbers would match the value here in February. All right, so let's go back to my slideshow. Actually, I think I was always going to show on inactive. So that's the use relationship option there. That's the function you're looking for, is use relationship. And tell it which one you're going to use. All right, so let's go back to my slideshow. Okay. Next section here. All right. Hierarchy paths and path functions and lookup values are some features that are built into DAX here. It allows us to use items in a parent-child type hierarchy. So back in multidimensional, I would have a cube, and I had a table that had a parent-child hierarchy built into it. A self-referencing foreign key on a table is basically what it is. So for example, maybe I have in AdventureWorks you have the employee table, and the employee table you have the employee key, and then you also have the parent employee key. And basically that's the person that you work for. So if my employee ID is 10 and my parent employee ID is 9, then employee number 10 works for number 9. And then so on and so forth. The number 9 would have also a parent ID on his row also, and so on and so forth, all the way up to the very top guy, the CEO. He's not going to have a parent, but everybody else is going to have one. And you can put a foreign key on the table and make it self-reference itself like that. And if you do that into multidimensional cubes and you drag that table in, it automatically creates that hierarchy for you. You don't have to do anything. It's done. Now, I will warn you this, and this is kind of off subject of PowerPivot, but in multidimensional cubes, you should never, ever use that self-joining parent-child. It is horrible for performance. If you've got a very small table, say 20,000 rows or something like that, then maybe that's fine. But if you get to large tables, especially if you're doing like, say, an employee table and you have thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees, not going to work out for you. You're going to have a huge degradation of performance there. You should manually go in and create those columns inside of multidimensional. All right, that being said, in DAX or in PowerPivot now, it does not use that relationship automatically. We can make it work, but it doesn't automatically do it. We've got to write a little function here to make it happen. And we're going to use a function called the path function, a path item, and we're going to use a lookup value function. These are all very simple functions by themselves, but put together, they make very powerful different DAX calculations for us. So let's go back to our workbook here. And let's go to our employee table. And let's see what we have here. So here we have, in our employee table here, my employee key and my parent employee key, just like I mentioned earlier. So there's my, so employee number 1 there, he works for number 18. And employee number 2, he works for number 7, and so on and so forth. And you can see that employee number 7 and employee number 8 work for whoever number 112 is, and so on and so forth there. So if I zoom back out and go over to the left here. So basically this is a parent-child hierarchy. It's like kind of like a self-referencing, foreign key in a table. But DAX doesn't automatically see that. But I can tell DAX, or I can create a column and tell it, hey, go find my hierarchy for me. Go through a path and find the items in my path and lay them out for me. And so if I click over here to the left, you'll see I've created a calculated column. And I'm simply putting in the word path. That's the name of my function. I'm putting in the beginning of the path and the end of the path. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And you'll notice below there, now we actually get a path. So you can see that the top dog, the number 1 guy in the company is employee 112. And up under him, there's number 23. And up under him, there's number 18. And at the very end, there's number 4. And here we go, number 6. Our employee number 6 works for 267, who works for 3, who works for 14, who again works for the CEO 112, and so on and so forth here. So we can see a whole path here of what's going on, and it is a little pipe delimited here for us. All right, so that's great. It gives me a path, but we can't really use that. My end users aren't going to look at that. It's not going to mean anything to them because these are just circuit keys in my database. So I've got to take it one step further. If I go over here to the left, I'm putting in a column here. I called it CEO. And I'm doing one last thing here. I'm doing a lookup value function. And what I'm saying is lookup. And what I want to look up, I want to look up the full name. So I want to find the full name. There's a column on this table called full name. And how do I want to look that up? Well, I want to look it up with the employee key. And where the employee key matches, and the item I need to match on, is the very first item in my path. So this column here is called employee path. That's what I named it right there. So I'm using a recursive here. I'm actually going back and getting my items I've already created. So if I can create one column, once I get that one working, I can create the next column and use that function or use that column in my next function. And that's what I've done here. So I'm saying go on that path right there and find me the first item. And I'm finding item number 112. And I'm saying, okay, now go look and find the employee key that matches that. Okay, and then bring back the full name. And this may be a little daunting here when you first look at this, but keep in mind that inside of DAX there are a lot of great things. Like for example, if I type in lookup here, notice how I'm getting this IntelliSense here automatically filling out down below here for me. So the lookup value comes up, and if I select lookup value, it automatically gives me this long list of the items. Like here's my resulting column name, so I know where it needs to go. What am I searching for? I'm searching through a column name here. I'm searching for a value, and I need to match on a search value there. That's it. So it kind of tells me exactly what I need to do. And every one of the functions that are built into PowerPivot do that. So if you're not sure of a function, if you're like, I think it started with an F, you can hit the letter F here, and there's all the functions that start with F, and you can find the one that you're looking for. Or if you think, I think it was a date function, I think it had the word date in it, so there's all my date. And of course, I have a date table in here, so showing those too, but there's all my date items there. All right. So pretty simple there in terms of what the path item is doing. It's just saying get the first path item. So for the next one over, all we got to do is change the last number to a 2. And the next one over, all I need to do is change the last number to a 3, and so on and so forth. And the nice thing about this is now I can name these columns whatever I want to name them. So I got a CEO, executive, and a manager here. Maybe my next column down is employee or whatnot, all the way down to whatever level I need to go down to. Now I had a good question one time, and when I was presenting this, and I asked, well, is there a way to find the items? Yes, there's actually a path count. So you can actually do a path count and find the max path count, and so you know how far down your hierarchy goes. In this case here for AdventureWorks, I believe it goes down 6 levels. So I would create 6 columns here if I wanted to. Okay, so now that's done, I can actually go over to my diagram view, and I have these columns created now. And if I zoom into our employee table here, you'll see I created a hierarchy here called org chart, and there goes I put CEO, executive, manager inside of there. To create a hierarchy, you just right-click and say Create Hierarchy, and then drop in the items that you want there. In this case, I'm giving them those 3 items there. And now I can go and I can hide those keys. So those employee key, parent key, these items here, I don't want my end users seeing these, so I'm going to hide those so my end users won't slice by those. It's always a good idea to protect your end users from themselves. Something else you'd probably want to hide is like a first name or even maybe a last name. It wouldn't make any sense to slice by first name because then all the Mikes would be joined together and all the Bobs would be joined together. It doesn't make any sense to really do that. So you want to protect your end users from themselves by hiding some of these items. It's really easy to do. You can right-click on here and you just select Hide from Client Tools. So that's what I've done. I've hidden a bunch of items here. There's an option up top here. It says Show Hidden, and you can check that or uncheck that. You notice when I do, all the items that I've got hidden here that are kind of grayed out, they appear and disappear from my workbook there. All right. Any questions, Julie, on those functions there?
No questions.
Okay. All right. Moving on. All right. So the last section we're going to cover here, we're going to talk about time intelligence. You're going to have a date table on your PowerPivot workbook, especially if you're going to be doing things like year-to-date or some additive measures, things like that. You're going to have a date dimension on there. When you create a date dimension and put it into your cube, it's very important to tell PowerPivot or your business tabular model where your date is at. It uses that column then to do all of its date functions. When you do YTD, it needs to know where the date is at. Also, you have to have a day for every single, you have to have a row for every single day in your date dimension table. I've seen people try to do tricks like, oh, well, we didn't have any sales for this month, so I want to take that one out or whatever, try to save space. You can't do that. You have to have a full date table in there from the beginning date to the ending date of all your information in your table. You need a row for every single day. So if you've got 10 years of data, then you need 365 times 10 in there. You're going to have a row for every day. Same thing's true in Performance Point too. That's a side note, but if you're doing Performance Point, time intelligence, things like that, you have to have a full date dimension there too in SharePoint. Okay, so we got to create a date table. There's a couple ways to do this. I've got a workbook that I've created, and my end user, they want to be able to refresh it, but they don't want their date dimension to be huge. In other words, if I just put in there 10 years of dates in my date dimension, that's going to be a huge date dimension. So instead of doing that, what we can do is we can actually write a query to go query the table and get the first date and the last date, and then kind of write a cursor to go through and create my date dimension for me. So when I actually reprocess my workbook, it creates a new date dimension for me every time, and I get a date for every date from the very first sale all the way down to the very last sale, and nothing other than that. So I don't get extra dates that I don't need in my date dimension. And again, it's going to be wrapped up in my blog here. You can actually download that. That would be a table, a query that I put inside my workbook. All right, so let's go back into the workbook here, and let's take a look at some of the time intelligence I've got built in here. So the first thing we need to do, let me speed this up a little bit here. Let's go to our date table here. All right, so across the top here we have a few options. We have our design option here and our advanced options. We're going to go to design and click on the drop-down menu here, and this is mark as date table. Click on mark as date table to check that. I've already checked that. And then the only setting you have to alter is telling it where your date column's at. Now this does have to be a real date column here, so if you're pulling in a something from SQL Server or whatnot, it can't be a string or an integer. You can't use something like this. It actually has to be a real date or date time column coming from SQL Server. If you're manually creating this using like a linked table or something like that, you make sure it's formatted as a date in your linked table before you bring it in also. And that's it. That's all there is to it to tell PowerPivot where your date is at. Once you've told it where your date is at, then functions start working on your sales data. So let me go back over to sales here, and let's take a look at some of these functions. I know we looked at this one briefly earlier here, but this is my total YTD. So total YTD is just saying, give me the total or sum up all my sales amount here, and where's my date at? And I just pick the full date alternate key, and that's it. That's all it does. And now it goes and adds them up by that full date alternate key. There are some extra functions that are built into this. If I click at the end here and zoom back in, you'll see there's a year end date option here. So if your year end date is a different date than the actual date you have in here, then you can change that here. So if you have maybe you're doing a fiscal year or something like that, just enter in the date that your actual year is ending. And then the year date function will shift that many days based on that. So you have to put in a date there for that. So that's year to date. We already did the user relationship one, talked about that. And I wanted to do one more. Oh, here we go. So here's my fiscal one right here I was just talking about. So basically I put in a date here of 6/30. So that's the this is actually for a client I was actually working with. That was their fiscal year date and end date for them. So I put in the fiscal year date of 6/30, and that's it. That's all I had to do. It shifted my year-to-date sales to begin on one day after 6/30 and end on 6/30. That's it. That's all it really is to the year-end date one there. All right, another function that you should definitely know about in terms of time intelligence, and that is a same period last year. Same period last year, it does exactly what it sounds like. It's saying go into last year and compare it to the same time period. So what I've done is I did a total YTD sum.
Sorry, Mike. We have a couple of questions, if it's okay, before we move on.
Yeah, sure. Open those up here.
I have forwarded the questions to you. I'm not quite sure if you can see them. Otherwise, I'll read them out. Okay, cool.
I got them. Thank you. All right, so let's see. If you need to track information at the hour, minute, or even seconds level, well, you need to create a timetable with a level of granularity. Yes, good question, Hector. So what you would need then, if you're going to track it down to the time, then what you want to do is you'll have, of course, a traditional date table like I've shown here, but you also want to have a time dimension also, so dim time. And then you'll have, if you need it down to the second, then you'll need a row for every second and tie that to your fact table. And then you can actually slice by time. I've got an example of that on, I do a monitoring of SQL Server. If you look at my blog and look at monitoring SQL Server, I've got a item out there where I've got to create a time dimension table, and I tied it to the SQL Server, so I can tell like when my IOs are high, when my weights are are higher than they should be by hour. I can slice it and look at each hour of the day, AM, PM, things like that. So yes, good question there. All right, next one. Let's see. Year YTN date. Which date or which year do you enter if you have more than 1 year's worth of days or data? Oh, okay, I got you. So let me go back here. So my fiscal year date here. that should matter. That year right there, since it's year to date, that shouldn't matter. It's just going to be 6/30 for every year. You have to put a year in there because it has to be a date format. But it's smart enough to know that 6/30 is the year and date for each year. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. You could put in 1900 there or 2050 or whatever. It wouldn't matter. All right, good questions. All right, let's keep trucking along here. And okay, so it's back to the same period as last year. All right, so total YTD, and again, let me click at the end here so you can kind of see what it says. So there's my expression there, which is sum of sales amount, my date, and my filter here. And in this case here, my date is same period as last year, full date alternate key. So I want to see my prior year-to-date sales. So same period last year is my date now. So here's my expression, here's my date. And so instead of just putting in full day alternate key, which would give me year-to-date right now, I put in full day alternate key surrounded by the same period last year function, and that says, all right, give me the full day alternate key last year at the same time. So if I'm slicing by the dates and I'm looking at today's date, I'm actually looking at based on last year's date. So again, it's very important to make sure you name these properly here. So I'd say prior year-to-date sales. If I was looking at last year's data, then I would see the year before that, and so on and so forth. And so same period last year just returns that date 1 year ago. All right, let's see. All right, so there's a couple more here I want to show you. They're not quite date ones here, but I want to show you some of these. They're ones that I get questions on quite a bit. So percent of all is a very popular request I get. So I'm going to do a summation of my sales amount divided by my sum of my sales amount. That would give me my percentage, right? But I want to do it for all, not just what I'm slicing by, not just this month or next month, for all my sales. Then you have to put in the all reseller sales amount. Whenever you want to do anything and you want to include the entire table, you don't want the filter that the end users are slicing by to be a part of your calculation, then you use the all function. If you want the filter to work, then you leave the all function off. And if I just put in reseller sales there, actually, if I wasn't going to use the all function here, then I could just leave this out. I wouldn't need that at all. I wouldn't need to calculate. I would just need sum of sales amount. But I want to do sum of sales amount all, so I want to get all my reseller sales, and so I can get a percentage of all of those. All right, and let's go. I think I have one for inventory here too. Yep, there we go. All right, another one here, very common one. You get questions about what's called semi-additive measures. So let's say I have inventory, right? I've got some books on my shelves and books in my warehouse, and at the end of January, I've got 50 books on the shelf. And at the end of February, I've got 100 books on the shelf. And at the end of March, I've got 200 books on the shelf. So I say, well, what is my inventory for quarter one? And if I ask that question now, I've got 3 different numbers each time. It doesn't make any sense to sum those up because the inventory level changed. It doesn't mean that some of those up would not give me the correct number because the inventory may have gone up or down each month based on sales and restocking. Maybe an average. You could do an average, what my inventory average was, and maybe some companies like to see that. Or maybe it's the very last day of the quarter. Whatever my inventory was on the last day of the quarter, that's my quarter one inventory. Or maybe it's the first day of the quarter. So those are business questions that are you'll have to figure out with your BAs, determine what the business is actually looking at there. But those are called semi-additive measures. So they don't really sum up or calculate up to a certain level. You've got to kind of go pick what numbers you want to see. So semi-additive can be done inside of DAX. And this is a very easy one here too. So I'm using my calculate function again. I'm getting the sum of my units in stock. And my filter is just saying, just go to the last date. Whatever the last date is, give me that one. So now if I'm slicing by month here, it's going to go to the last day of the last month and give me my inventory for that date. And so my quarter one would be whatever the values were on the last day of the month there. And if I go over to my workbook, you can actually see that in action here. Go over to inventory, and there it is. So there's my total units in closing there. So you can see in January I had 95, in February I had 230, and in March I had 75. And so my total units at the end of the month there, or 75. That is a semi-additive one. And I'm trying to think, is there any other ones that I want to show in here real quick? You can also do it with first date. So if I need the first date, it's just the opposite of the last date. And and there's one other one you can use, closing balance month. It works basically the same as the last date function here. It just gives us the ability to specify a specific date there. That's all.
We have a quick question, Mike, if it's okay.
Sure.
The question is from Daniel. Can I create a time dimension same as analysis services wizard creates?
Can I create a time dimension? Yes. To create a time dimension, you're not going to. There's no wizard that's built into DAX that does it for you. One way would be just to grab a time dimension table. Actually, I have a script out on my blog that will actually create a time dimension table for you that you can download for free and run that, create a table, and then you can use that as a source inside of here. Another way to do it, you can actually create a what's called a linked table. So if we come up here and actually create a table here, so I can say, time, and maybe this is, hour and minutes, something like this, and my time is midnight, something like that. My hour is, of course, midnight. My minutes is 00. And then you can actually drag these functions down here and kind of add these up. So this would be 12:01. This would be 12. This would be 01, something like this. And if I start dragging these down now, it should fill it automatically for me, something like that. And it's not quite doing what I wanted there. I'd have to adjust that. But basically, you'll be able to create a time dimension here. Then you highlight this and make it a table. So format as table. Okay, and then we go over here to PowerPivot and click Add to Data Model. And then when I click this Add to Data Model, this will just make it a table in my data model, and I can map it over to what I need. So you can do a linked table, or you can actually create a whole new table inside your model. Speaking of that, so there's a little thing I've seen a lot of my clients do. If you're trying to add a new table to your model, so you want to add a new query to your model here, I've seen people go up here, say from database, okay, I need to get it from SQL Server, and they put in the server name, database name, and they connect to it, and they pull in that and put it in their table. The problem with that is when you do this, is actually creating a new connection here. So I'm going to have two connections to the same database going on at the same time. Don't really need to do that. So what I want to do is go to existing connections. Here's the connection I already have going on. I want to open that up, and I'll say write a query here. And then I write my query, select from, dem time, whatever, yada, yada, yada here to pull in my new table. And this would give me a friendly name here. I can name it, dem time. And then I can put my query, select from my dem time table. It would add it in. It would show inside of my diagram view over here. And I can map my relationship to whatever table has a time on it. Good question there. Any other questions?
There's none so far. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So to wrap up here, right here at the end, if you go out to my blog, or you can also download it from this link here, PowerPivot ssrslog.codeplex.com. I've got a Codeplex project out there, free to download. So if you're using reporting services, and one of the things you've always wanted to do is be able to tell, how good your report server is running, who's running what reports, how long the reports are taking to run, when are the reports being run, whether there's subscriptions, but people running it. I've created a whole workbook here that connects to your reporting services instance. All you have to do is change the server name, point it over there. I've got some instructions built into it. You can download it. Again, it's a free one. Try it out. If you got some improvements to it, you want to make it better, great, go for it. It's a Codeplex project, so we can collaborate on it. I've already had several people make some changes and updates to it, which is awesome. So it's a free thing for you to download, and if you're using reporting services, this will help you out a lot in terms of tracking what's going on with SSRS. So here's something you can actually take back today and use right away. And there's my information. Again, there's my blog. If you're a tweeter, you can follow me on Twitter. And if you have any questions, my email address is mdavis@pragmaticworks.com also. And I appreciate you guys having me today. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Julie.
Hi, Mike. I've got another follow-up question, if it's okay.
Sure, yeah.
It's again from Daniel. So he says, I need to create 445 or 544 logic with calendar, which is already appears in AS Wizards. What about PowerPivot?
Yep, there's no wizard built in, unfortunately, for PowerPivot to do that. You're going to have to manually do that. So you would have to actually write DAX calculations to make that happen. I have not done that yet. I'm sure I'm going to run into that soon because I have done 445s for clients in the past in traditional cubes, but I have not had to do it in DAX yet. So great question. Don't have a solution built for you yet, though.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm just looking for more questions here. I don't think we have anything new, so anyone who wants to ask questions, feel free to do so. We still have about 8 minutes, so we'll just wait for maybe a couple more minutes and see.
Sure. If anybody has any questions, well, we won't have to take them. If not, appreciate you guys having me today. And again, you can always ask me. You can always email me or hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for presenting today. And I think that CodePlex project that you've got sounds interesting. Which one? Switching back to that screen there again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, PowerPivot SSRS log.
Wow, this is so cool. So the backend is just PowerPivot, right? And just reads from the SSRS, the reporting services database at the backend?
That's correct. Yep.
Nice. This is very good.
Just point it to your report server database, and that's it. You have a full logging reporting option built in now.
I suppose I'm not quite sure how other organizations run, but I know that several clients that I've worked with, they usually have, hundreds of reports, but they're not really sure whether they're being used. So this might be really handy to find out those that are not used for quite some time.
Yep, you can see exactly what reports are being used and which ones are not, and who's running them, and if anybody's running them.
Right. So are you going to pass Summit this year?
I did not get accepted to speak this year, unfortunately. I'm quite upset about that, but I might actually be there. I might actually show up. I'm not sure. Depends on how the schedule here works, the Pragmatic Works, but I'm hoping to be there. It's funny. It's usually in Seattle. I've been like every year for the last 4 or 5 years. Always make it to Seattle from Jacksonville, Florida, so all on the opposite side of the country. And now this year it's in Charlotte, so it's only like about a 5-hour drive for me, and I might not go. So we'll see. I'm hoping to make it. So
yeah, no worries. Sounds good.
What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm going. I'm actually presenting, so it'll be it'll be interesting. So yeah, I've never been to Charlotte before, so.
What are you presenting on?
It's geospatial data.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
Good. So showing GeoFlow?
Yeah, GeoFlow and a bit of PowerView, and some of them are with PowerPivot backend. So what else?
Very nice.
Yeah. Very so it'll be a bit demo heavy.
Good. I like those kind of sessions.
Okay, well, it looks like there are no more questions, so I'd like to thank you, Mike, for presenting today and everyone for attending, and I'd also like to thank Pragmatic Works for sponsoring today's session. So I will draw a winner for the free ebook, and I will email you about the details of the free ebook. Email the winner of the free ebook. Okay, thank you guys, and have a great day.
Yes, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, bye.